So Myrisa Christy is here today, and I'm hoping Michael Zachary will join us in a few. And she's going to talk about the funding coming up for 2024 and walk you all through the steps.
Yeah, so thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate it. And I don't know if we want to do a PowerPoint presentation for everybody or not, but I do have one ready to go. But we can walk through. So I'll tell a little bit about myself. My name is Myrisa Christy. I've worked with the Kentucky Center for Ag and Rural Development for around a decade. And I've known Tanya for even longer, I think. Here and there. So I'll actually be leaving my position in a couple of weeks. But KCARD, or Kentucky Center for Ag and Rural Development, we call it KCARD because the rest is too long. They do have a grant facilitator specifically still in place, and they'll be able to help people. So what I was hoping to go over tonight was what we expect to be open in the first half of 2024. Specifically the stuff that is in USDA Rural Development and the Agricultural Marketing Service grants. So let me see if I can successfully, as everyone can see how potentially uncorded. Well, I can't share my screen, so I'll just, probably easier to watch me talk than see slides anyway. So the way that I actually got into this was years and years ago. I helped a few farmers write what's called a USDA Rural Development Value-Added Producer Grant. That's probably the way that I've been able to help the most farmers in the state bring in money, grant money directly, large amounts of grant money directly to help them. So what that is, it is a grant that is for adding value or getting more value from what you're doing. Now, so what it won't do is it won't pay you to keep doing what you're already doing. It won't give you money for anything you can keep. And it is a lot of work from beginning to end. Over the years, we actually helped people, like if it got to where if I was carrying a lot of the burden of getting the grant across the finish line, I realized that in the end, those people may never be able to get a reimbursement because it's work through and through, not just the work of doing the grant. So that's one thing that, I've kind of over the years come to realize if I'm more interested. So this is one of those things you really have to be interested to get the money. So what is value added? It's not just a change in physical state, which is what most of us assume it is. And by the way, over the years, I've gotten them to what the definition of that is. Most of us think like, oh, jam can't go back into strawberries. Well, other changes in physical state include a living steer to a dead steer. It cannot go back once you use the bolt, okay? Or whatever way you're using to end that steer's life. So it's a change in physical state. If that steer is worth more in pieces sold than he is living in the field, then that is a change in physical state and it results in added value. The other one that we see a lot is locally produced, oh, by the way, interrupt me with questions, is locally produced agricultural food. So their definition of local is 400 miles as the crow flies. So if you lived in South Central Kentucky, kind of the area between I-64, I-65, I-75, and the Cumberland Parkway, within the crow flies actually get you pretty much Chicago and Atlanta for reference. And the way that you're saying I would get extra value there is if you're selling tomatoes at a price premium because you're selling it as a locally produced tomato, then that's extra value. If you're selling your beef as locally produced beef, and that's an added value. So locally produced agricultural food. And the other one that we see a lot, it's produced in a manner that enhances value. So that's where you get your like organic, organic produce and proteins can be worth more. You can get antibiotic, steroid, hormone free. You can also get like your heirloom can sometimes go into this category. So those are the three ways we usually see. There's two more. I'm not going to get into it because it gets in the weeds of literally never seen a project do it in the state. in the last 12 years, so not going to get in there, or other states. And I will tell you that the folks at KCARD are really good at helping people with these. You have to have a third-party business plan to score well on these, and KCARD will help you prepare that for free before you get into any grant programs that are federal in nature. You need to get, at this point in time, it's called a UEI, or Unique Entity Identifier, and KCARD can walk you through that for free if you ever, and then that you get that on SAM.gov. The other thing that for a lot of these programs, not this one necessarily, but the grants.gov login. So this one you don't require that. You can still mail it to at least, okay, as of last year, they haven't done the new Federal Register notice, which is how you find out about this one. You sign up for the Federal Register and wait for them to send a notice about it, or there'll be a press release, but I like the Federal Register. So they'll put the rules to the program. They don't usually change very much. Sometimes there's different administrative priorities, really administration priorities, but that's how you find out. This grant is actually usually up to $250,000 for a working capital grant. The rub comes in like what it pays for. So, for example, those of you from the South Central portion of Kentucky would be familiar with Kenny's Farmhouse Cheese. So they have had a value-added producer grant, and they got it about the same time that they're expanding their cheese cave. So everybody thought they were using the grant to expand their cheese cave. So this is where I encourage people to think creatively about how they use grant fundings. You can't use a value-added producer grant for that. You can't use a value-added producer grant for anything that you get to keep. And you get to keep a constructed building. But what they were able to do, because they were expanding their market at the same time, they were able to pay for someone to do marketing. They were able to pay for more people to have processing. They're able to pay for more ingredients that go in their cheese. You can't make cheese without salt and water. And I got the USDA to pay for big jugs of water. So, but it is dollar. When you think of that $250,000, that's dollar for dollar. Well, and they want dollar for dollar. So one of the ways that I ask people to think about dollar for dollar with this grant program, it doesn't work with all of them, but if you have 4 quarters, if you say like, I've got 4 quarters, and oh, I can share screen now, I think. Can't I, Letitia? Nope. If you have 4 quarters, because I have a graphic on this, if you think of every dollar that you spend on the grant as 4 quarters, and you're like, all right, so the federal government's going to give me back 2 of those 4 after I get my reimbursement, right? Because this is a reimbursement-based grant. Well, they will actually allow 1/4 to be in kind. So now it means that for every 75 cents you spend, the federal government gives you back 50. So you actually only have 1/4 in. You can actually do more in kind than that. You could do, let's say you were doing, I already used beef. So let's say that you are doing, your value added is that you are indeed steers into, steaks and ground beef. And so you could say that we're making a family in kind contribution of $125,000 worth of steers. That's going to go in. And I'm going to use my labor, 125, this is a 3-year long grant. So $125,000 worth of my labor can go into this. And then you would be able to literally have no cash in it other than waiting for yourself to be reimbursed. So then it becomes a full reimbursement. Now, what they have done, because they really want to see, this is one of the rare instances that the federal government will give money to individual business owners, and this is kind of what it was built for. They like to see some cash in there. They like to see you have some cash on a little, as I say, skin in the game, right? They want you to have some investment. So I advise people to not go too much above 25% in kind, but legally you can. Years that the scoring's hard, that 2 or 3 points you're going to miss from not having cash is going to be difficult. The other thing I would say is that you don't have to have the cash necessarily on hand. You can show that you have match through authorization from a line of credit. You can, if someone else is providing cash, there's lots of different ways. And there's lots of good ways to get priority points in the program. I won't go into that tonight too much, other than saying small and mid-sized family farms, what the definition of that is that your average revenue is less than $1 million over the last 3 years, and that's 5 points. So there's ways for smaller producers to be able to use all in kind, but not to have to, but still get priority points. And they also have socially disadvantaged priority points. So, the basis of this grant, everybody asks, because I have people who work with grantees in other states, and I had someone call me about a week ago and said, Kentucky got 4 and 2 of these states in Appalachia got none. How did you guys do that? It's really not a secret. I don't try to keep it a secret. There's things that are said over and over in the application. And if you look in the announcements, which is what I used to do for years, if you're ever interested in a grant program and it's been done before, look at how they talked about the previous awards, the word they used. Some of the words they always use is we're going to increase the customer base, especially if you can increase that customer base in a rural area. It increased the amount of revenue, amount of money available to producers. And right now, the emphasis is very much on increasing that in rural areas and food insecure areas. So those two things, but for USD rural development, rural areas is the big thing. So they do want to see that you're increasing what other producers or farmers can have. And one thing that over the years, like when I first started writing grants, I thought I would just be like really flowery and passionate. And what I have found, particularly with these, is write it like it's actually, if you work with KCARD on a business plan, you can kind of copy and paste portions of it into the grant, because once a business plan's written, it's yours and you can do with it whatever you want. If you want to put it in your grant, then you can.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
for maybe answer. A lot of farmers ask, when they do the in kind, they want to know how much of a rate that they can charge, or how much can they charge themselves if they, or how much is expected, maybe that they're not going over or not under.
So there's a form, like on this one, there's a form in like Appendix E or something like that. It's like, here's our in-kind. And what we've done over the years, and we use this anytime we're using in-kind labor, we actually go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and we type like farm manager or something like that. That would be what you're doing for the farm. Agricultural product marketer, or think of something like you just type it in and say like, how much do these people get paid? And it's like $36 an hour. And you're like, okay, well, we live in a rural part of Kentucky, so even if we only make it $27 an hour, that's still figuring that in-kind time pretty high compared to what most farmers would actually pay themselves, right? Especially ones that are starting out. So that's actually, we use the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we just screenshot the little thing there and we put a link to it, and we tell people to include that on the justification of the in-kind. Does that answer your question, Tanya?
Yeah, it does. A lot of times, I think some I've seen, they'll have me look over and they will undercut themselves.
Oh yeah, $10 an hour. They're gonna value their time at $10 an hour. No, no, no. Let's hope that you don't spend more than 10 more hours a week on the farm on this project. Let's value your time at like $30 an hour. I mean, I regularly done that, and they've always accepted it as long as it's backed up by that Bureau of Labor Statistics data. So if it's backed up by that and it's reasonable, that's fine.
Another question is with the value added. So like you said, there's capital, and then there is, what's the second stage you can do of the?
Well, the first stage is the planning. You can do a planning grant.
Yes, that's the one.
And so if you do the planning grant, a lot of times we don't have independent producers do a planning grant, because if an independent producer, which independent producer is a farmer who's supplying over 51% of it and they're involved. Can you share a link to the labor report? Yes. By the way, I've gotten to the age that I cannot talk and Google search at the same time, but
I'll Google it.
Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay. Now I've forgot what I was talking about. Oh, working capital versus a planning. So a lot of our farmers who are applying do not apply for a planning grant, because it does require that dollar for dollar match still, when we see the planning grants is if you have a co-op or a group going together, they will usually have to get a planning grant. The way they've set these up is if you are an independent, what they call an independent producers, which is one of the ways to apply. It's the first way to apply. There's several different eligible entity types, but the independent producer is the one that we work with most commonly. And I'm going to see if I have a list. So they are independent producers. If you have been marketing that product or that commodity, if you've been selling it for at least 2 years, you can ask for more than $50,000 without having a feasibility study. If you want less than $50,000, you don't have to have been even selling the product for 2 years. If you can have a business plan instead of having a feasibility study. The people that we have seen that have done planning grants, they usually are expanding into a product or an area that they've not done before. And the reason is because a lot of times feasibility studies can cost, $20,000 to $50,000. And since that's a dollar for dollar amount, you can't say like my steers are going toward the feasibility study because it's all planning. So it's very hard to get in kind. So the independent farmer would have to come up with some money from somewhere to pay for the other half of whatever the cost was. You could, in theory, use in Kentucky a source like the Kentucky Ag Development Fund or other county funds. You could use other non-federal funds, some private funds to pay for the other half. But I will say that you can actually get more than one working capital grant of $250,000 as long as you're not producing the same thing exactly. And when I say exactly, I mean if you were selling organic vegetables, and so your method of adding value was that they were raised in with organic methods, with an organic certification, you could then have a second buyer producer grant that is based on selling food for a premium because it's local within 400 miles, because it's different than being organic.
So in Kentucky, there's been a couple of farmers that had done that, right? Because Kenny, he did it. And also,
He received 2, but I think they've only used 1.
and is it Equus Run? Equus?
Equus has had at least 3. Yeah, it's a winery and they've produced 3 different products. So they changed what the product was instead of changing the way this added value.
So if I was to start a vineyard and plant grapes this year, how soon could I think about applying for anything if I'm not already with it on existing?
So you've planted grapes. Let's say
I have not. I'm just thinking.
In theory, if you've planted grapes, you've what? So I'm not a viticulture expert. Okay. So you got 5 years probably until you're going to have any decent.
It can be 3.
If based on the variety that Patsy Watts has suggested, they could do it in 2 years. So here's something what I want to make with the grapes, and I haven't decided yet.
It usually goes like if the younger they are, the less grapes they produce. So over time, the older as they age, you get more clusters.
Yeah. So on that, what I would say is, if you wanted to, I was trying to see what was in the chat. So you wouldn't want to apply. So here would be a plan for you. If you're looking at grapes and you're going to have like wine in 2 years, okay, or 3. So
or jelly and jams. I'm not sure.
Jelly and jams. If you're going to have a value added product, some change of state product. So since you won't have been marketing it for 2 years, what you could do is do a short, like a 1 to 1.5 year grant at that less than $50,000 level, but do it only on one product. Right?
Okay, so grant for 1 to 5 years and just do it on one product.
1 to 1.5.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know
One
why.
to 1.5, yeah, and do it on one product at 50,000. And then if after you have experience marketing that product, you could add other products or do different products to the mix and do for the more than the 50 to $250,000 and do the 3 year. And what you just want to keep it that first one very narrow. That, or you can say that first one's like change of state, and the second one could be locally marketed food product. Or the first one could be locally marketed food product, and the second one, if you know at first you're probably going to be producing jams and jellies, you're like, this is a locally marketed food product, and you know that by the time that one's done in another year and a half, like I'm going to have wines on board too, because I don't think you can legally market wines as food. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked up the regs on that, but I would start with the locally marketed food product and then go to change of state. You like that, Letitia? I haven't looked up the regs on that. But you know what I'm saying? So you start one way, or you start with like this one product, and then you have multiples that you can say that you've marked. You can, once you have more experience, go for the bigger amount of money. So I've had two farmers do that, actually. Two farmers that were organic, and then their second, they started out organic, and their second ones were locally marketed food product, because their stuff was going into markets that was worth more. It was both vegetable farmers. I've had two at this point.
That's
At
what I was going to
least.
ask you about, like vegetable farmers. So what type of different products do they have in order for them to be considered like a value added product? Or if they're in the planning stages, if they wanted to expand their operation, could they use the planning grant? Or I guess my question is, how do they get to the $250,000 mark?
If they've been at least selling vegetables for 2 years, they can already do above that 50,000.
Okay.
So there's no main thing. And I see your hand up, Let's just let me just expound on what they're doing to most vegetable farmers who aren't organic or heirloom or making it into like chutney, right? They're doing the locally marketed food product. That's how they're adding values, because a tomato's worth more when you sell it locally. Even if you sell it usually to a supermarket locally, it's still worth more than if you sold it at a produce terminal in somewhere in Chicago or wherever. So you're looking at, like, instead of 30 cents a pound for tomatoes, you're getting $1.30 per pound for tomatoes, let's say. So you don't have to, it doesn't matter that you're not selling it at farmers markets. It just matters that you're adding value by selling it locally. And locally is 400 miles. So you could sell it and it'd be resold, as long as you, the farmer, are getting the added value. What's your question, Letitia?
So the locally, what are the words?
Locally marketed food product.
Okay,
Locally,
that could be some locally marketed food product.
I had all the wrong direction myself. Locally marketed. Okay.
So that could be something that we're already selling. So
Yeah.
something that we've already kind of put out there. So for instance, if I did like yeah, like a jams or a jelly, and we've already been selling at the market, I can apply for a grant less than 50,000 or more than
More,
50,
if you've been doing it for 2 years, more. So here's the rub.
How do you prove the 2 years?
You
Like, are they
say
gonna
that you
ask?
have.
Huh?
You say that you have.
Oh, okay.
Just keep in mind, the federal government does not take kindly to being lied to, okay? They'll ask for their money back, maybe sue you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Never had it happen. But so here's the other thing I want, like, and back to the grapes thing. So if you're looking, or jams and jellies, let's say that you're growing a berry of some type and you're making it into jam. Or I've had vineyards.
Right now I'm growing strawberries.
You're growing strawberries, you're making it to jam. Well, you'd eventually like to make strawberry wine, but you don't have a big enough strawberry patch to use 100% of your own strawberries in the wine.
Okay.
This grant could pay for you to purchase up to 49% of the total strawberries. You have to produce 51% of those strawberries, 51% of those cattle, 51% of every cucumber, eggplant, whatever vegetable you stick under the thing. Like if you're making strawberry jam right now, And you're also buying grapes to make grape jelly. You can't include the grape jelly on the grant, but you can do the strawberry. And you have to make sure that you're doing 51%. Like, let's say you're sold 100 jars. I'm just keeping numbers simple. 100 jars of jam this year, and you want to sell 1,000 next year. You have to grow enough strawberries to do 51% of those 1,000 jars, not just of your 100, like all of the increase. So that's an interesting, because I've had wineries, and that's probably why Equus Run and others have done it multiple times, is because it can pay for the raw commodity and the processing. The key to this grant is it will not pay for anything you get to keep. Let's say you're making jam with it. It won't pay for the production of the berries, but it could value the berries that you contribute as in kind at a fair market price. And we usually, like, depending to a vegetable, like everything from looking at Kentucky produce auction reports, which is what we'll use a lot of times for produce, to beef cattle sales numbers for beef, all those kind of things, your fair market value of your in-kind commodity. So you can back that up. So you can get the value of your strawberries as in kind. It would also pay for the increased, from 100 to 1,000. It would pay for that extra 1,000, all the sugar you would need if you're making jam with sugar, all the sugar you would need for the or it would pay for 2/3, depending on how you do it. Here's eligible expenses: the sugar, the pectin, the jars. Let's say you want to do a marketing label redesign, also eligible. The lids, printing the label themselves, hiring someone to do a website, hiring someone, paying for brochures to be made, paying for your travel to do markets. It'll pay for all of that. The key to that is none of that do you actually get to keep. What it won't pay for is any equipment to make the jelly. It wouldn't pay for, like, a new stove. It would pay, like, anything that you use up in the value-added process, it will pay for. It would even pay for another human to help you process the strawberries into jelly.
So what about packaging? It sounds like
Oh,
it
yeah.
might pay for packaging
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
jars, boxes. Like, we've had people who are produce farmers that, like, have it pay for their CSA boxes, their weekly CSA boxes. Now, when I say pay for, that means they're an eligible cash expense, and what % reimbursement you get based on how your match works. Yeah, it'll pay for that. So here's what advice I would give while everybody gets excited, like all the things it would pay for. I do not recommend anyone put together one of these grants for less than $20,000 to $25,000. Is there any grant that will pay for equipment? Why, Letitia, you have reached the magic question at the end of my presentation that I'm now have completely gone off. Because if I'm not staring at a PowerPoint, then I'll just go off of what I remember. So yeah, we'll get to that in just, it's at the end of what I'm using as my outline right now. So if you're interested in a value-added producer grant, I recommend going ahead and working on sam.gov. Make sure to go to sam.gov and get a UEI. With this particular program, you'll have to have a UEI that has an expiration date. You can't just get registered. You need an expiration date. There's some programs at the end, one of which there's equipment that you will only just need to have a UEI. UEI stands for Unique Entity Identifier. You can get those just by proving that your entity is real. Pieces of information you will need. Pieces, they'll accept like 2 forms. But if you're an incorporated business and you have a Secretary of State filing, that'll work. If you have a bank account, if you have taxes that show that you have income from this entity. I have individual farmers who aren't incorporated who have gotten this. And in order to verify that the business was real, we actually requested that they mail us a postcard, and that worked. So,
and they'll also do individual, because I had to have it for NRCS.
Yeah, I don't know if you did the postcard or not. I'm trying to remember what the records were that we did for individual to prove that people were.
They just need a front copy of your driver's license.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, a place like you have to have something with your mailing address on there.
Yeah, I think that's the reason we had them send the postcard was it was fast. Like they didn't accept whatever, they had 2 farmers didn't accept whatever we had done. So we used the mail and it happened in like 4 days. It did not take a long time. I cannot guarantee that it will not take a long time. Okay. Same.gov works really, really well when it works. When it doesn't work, it works poorly.
Letitia wants to know, can you make a checklist and send it out? I can send everybody a copy of one of the value added grant templates. If you can make the checklist, Marissa.
I have a checklist.
Okay.
What kind of checklist, Letitia? Do you want a checklist for getting registered? I don't care to send you all the
Just all the steps, all the
all the
information
steps.
all the documents we should gather before we even fill out this application would be helpful. And not just for me, but like to pass it along, you know.
So we usually have like it doesn't have all the documents on it, but we usually every year when it comes out, we make a new document that's like, here's everything you need to have to be ready to go. So I will find one of those from 2023 because we haven't made one for 2024 yet because it's not out. So I will find that from 2023. And also in the application, there is a checklist of all the pieces you're going to need. It's like page 3 in the application. I'll also go ahead and while I'm thinking about it, I'll send Tanya this entire presentation before I forget right now, and then she can pass that along. So
2 people can work to apply, can't they?
what now?
2 people can work to apply for the grant for the value added. That's Joanna's question.
Like together?
Yeah, so say that I provide the tomatoes and Letitia provides the peppers or the cilantro or whatever to 2 different entities work on the same grant, from the same grant.
So the question I would have, you might consider developing an LLC or a limited liability partnership in that case. And you would each be independent producers.
Well, right now we both have our own. So right now we both individual.
Yeah, you're independent
anyway.
producers. You're independent producers. The only reason that I would say that you might, I think you would go together as an LLC or an LLP or some sort of mutually owned business
What about
because
a limited liability partnership?
yeah, an LLP, like that's a limited liability partnership would probably be I've never had one apply. I've actually had for 2 farms before, like beef and mushrooms. It sounds real weird, but that's what applied together because there was a beef and vegetable farm, but they were running a CSA together. But they developed an entity that covered both farms. And that's what applied. The reason that you want an entity that covers both farms is because when you get that same.gov, you can't apply to that together.
Okay.
That's the reason. Unless one of you, I mean, like you could apply and say, you know, we're doing it with the tomatoes and then yeah, if you're making a product that involves both ingredients, I would say some sort of business relationship would be, I've always seen it as a formal business relationship. I haven't thought about how you would do it as not a formal business relationship. And the same.gov piece is what's tripping me up. It's not a regulatory thing, except that you have to have same.gov.
Letitia has a question. Would we apply for a planning grant first?
No.
No.
Okay. Here's my, and let's Edward has it, but if my theory is that as long as you all have been producing this product 2 years, or if you were going for less than 50 grand, I wouldn't apply for a planning grant first. If you're doing something, so here's my rule of, because a planning grant is going to give you a feasibility study. You're going to have to end up putting money into getting that feasibility study. And it's going to put you a year behind launching your project because this only comes out once a year, right? So my rule of thumb on feasibility studies, a lot of them cost between, you know, like the cheapest one that I think I've ever worked with KCARD on was like $20,000. So if it's going to cost you like for $20,000 with jam, you can probably run the experiment, right? Yeah, even like if you say the feasibility study costs 20,000, it's the lowest and so you have to come up with $10,000 cash, you can still probably run the experiment with $10,000. That's my non-practical. I mean, if I don't want anyone to ever pay for a feasibility study that doesn't have to have one. All right. I sent the the presentation, which actually goes over a lot of what you want to have first and the things to think about and eligibility questions. It doesn't go over, and I don't have ready-made, I don't have at my fingertips getting registered for sam.gov, but I know we have that somewhere. So you do have to own the project until it reaches consumers. So we've actually run into things where like, okay, so you can't sell, you can't have someone buy your steer, process it, and then sell it back to you. You have to like pay for the steer processing. You have to continue and keep ownership of the steer, right? So just think about that. Like there's been co-packers for like jams and jellies, and I don't think this is what Letitia and JoJoanna are planning, but you can't have, I can't sell you my strawberries and you sell me jam back. I can pay you to process them though. That's how that works. You have to maintain ownership. So real quick, ways that funds have been spent. Processing expenses is a big one, especially if you're dealing with livestock. Processing livestock is very expensive. Marketing expenses, purchasing more raw commodity, which I think everybody was excited to hear that you could buy grapes or strawberries with it. Keep in mind, you can only, if you're calling it a commodity, you can only purchase ones that you're also producing. You still have to produce 51%. Let's pretend that you want to just buy the tomatoes from Letitia instead of her be a partner. Then they're not a commodity, they're an ingredient. That's how you talk about it. Maybe I'll get caught on that one day, but I haven't yet. Paying for, so here's something that over the years, people are like, I'm going to pay to hire a new marketing person. I have so many people or a new processing person that think that that's how they're going to spend the money. I'm going to hire my first employee. Make sure that you're ready for it if that's an expense you put in the grant, because I have seen more value to producer grant money go unused for that purpose than anything else. Sincerely, just, maybe you're ready to hire an employee, but you don't have a great way to hire, and so you can't find the right person to work for you. That's been an issue for some folks. Things that are ineligible, I'm going to go over this real quick again. Pre-harvest production. So I actually have had them pay for people packing the CSA boxes after it's harvested. Washing and packing it into a CSA box was eligible. Harvesting it wasn't. So it has to be post-production. Anything building-wise, building, improving, renovating, I don't care if you're installing a light switch, it's not eligible. It won't pay you for your strawberries or steers. It will not, you cannot use it to pay for other family labor. If they are related to you, their costs are ineligible in the grant. That's something that we've had a lot of people have issues with. And anything that is considered fixed equipment. So something that has a value of more than $5,000 and it has a useful life that's longer than the end of the grant. So, for example, cheese shredding machine, not eligible. The mats that go under aging cheeses, eligible. A computer for like doing tracking and scanning and all that kind of stuff, that's eligible. Computers are outdated easily, and they don't usually cost more than $5,000. You might be pushing if you want an ice machine to cool down your broccoli. They're going to question that. And here's the kicker. If you have enough what they deem as equipment in the grant, if it's more than 10% of your total, your entire application is deemed ineligible. So I always tell people if they aren't sure that it can be included or you don't know for sure and you can't get a good answer, just make sure whatever might be equipment, when you add them all together, less than 10% of the grant or you get kicked out. Learned that one the hard way. Felt real bad. I make mistakes too. They actually do allow you to submit these on grants.gov if you're a glutton for punishment. You can also stick them in a mailing address, or what we recommend is you can take them to your local rural development office and ask for a receipt of service so that they know you've received it. And if you get it in there early, they may even sit down and go through it and make sure all the pieces are there, but hopefully you don't have to do that because whoever's working with at KCARD has already sat down and gone through you with all those pieces over Zoom or in person. I've done that enough times that, yeah. So to get more than $50,000, you do need a third-party business plan. It doesn't have to be from KCARD, but they're pretty good at making business plans that you just cut and paste parts of these, just go right into the grant application. Just saying. One thing to keep in mind when you get the whole application that Tanya was going to send you is that doesn't include the federal forms you need to have. It doesn't include the SF 424. It doesn't include the 424A. So you're going to need to find all of those and have someone help you fill them out. They're really finicky forms because they're in PDF. And so you have to download the free version of Adobe Acrobat because they're fillable PDFs. We have helped people fill those out. May have emailed filled out PDFs back to people to sign as pictures because Adobe can be a real pain in the rear, especially if you're not using Microsoft or it's an older Microsoft computer, because I've had trouble with it. This application, when you open it up, is right at 60 pages long. It looks really intimidating. If you have someone that can go over it with you, which KCARD can do this, and literally, I used to go and take like a Sharpie and be like, this page doesn't apply to you because it's going to say, are you an independent producer? And you're like, yes. And it's going to be like, tell us how you are involved in the day-to-day activity of your farm. And you're like, this way. And then the next 5 pages are all the other ways that you could have applied. Harvest, and like you could have been an independent producer who's a steering committee. You could have been a farmer or rancher cooperative. You could have been a majority controlled producer-based business. All those pages don't apply to you. You don't have to answer it. You don't even have to say no. You just check the first one. Let's see. The basic 4 parts that really get scored is nature of the proposed venture, which includes your financial projections and describes in depth your customer base and how it makes your customer base bigger and how it increases revenue to farmers. I use those words over and over and over again to say, like, we're going to do this and it's going to increase the customer base. We're going to do this and this many farmers will see increased revenue. If you're buying some steers from a farmer who's not a family member, okay, if you bought steers from your brother, they're not, you can't use the money for that. You can still get the steers from your brother, you just can't use grant money for that.
So how would they be able to, once they got their planning together or want to apply for the 250,000, how do they get like the freezer equipment and that type of thing, stuff that they'll need to store?
So here's the thing. And I got sidetracked on my story about Kenny's. They all thought that he'd use the grant to pay for the new cheese cave. That's not what he used it for. Every time he got a reimbursement check from the federal government, he paid for part of the cheese cave. I don't really know that's exactly how it worked, but he was getting something paid for. And what you do with those reimbursement checks you get back, they don't care. The other way, so hold off on the equipment. Let me finish the value added real quick. I'll finish it real quick. So now I'm going to go ahead and skip to what I was going to say for last. So that's the main grant that we use with farmers from USDA Rural Development. And it's the grant that you're going to see, like whatever administration it is going to put out a thing that's like, we help develop small rural businesses. We strengthened the local food supply chain resilience. We created jobs, whatever it was, right? The thing that the COVID-19 pandemic really brought up was the fact that we do not have regional and resilient and regional food infrastructure. So what they've done is KCARD, Community Farm Alliance, Black Soil, several entities from Kentucky and also across Appalachia went together and put in a regional food business center application to have a cooperative agreement with the Agricultural Marketing Service. And so huge grant, like 42 million. It did not all go to Kentucky. Sorry, there's like 7 states. But out of that, about half is going to be subgrants. Those subgrants are right now, they're going to be called business builder grants. We are not allowed to even turn in the plan for how we're going to spend that money until February the 1st. So we're hoping that we can get the first round out and judged at the end of July. Like the way we're hoping that Agricultural Marketing Service, AMS, because it's a cooperative agreement, so we need to run things by them. It's not just a grant. These awards are actually going to have no match. If you are working with a technical service provider, no match. They really want to pay for equipment, but it has to be equipment that's not, it's not going to be, okay. USDA Rural Development and Ag Marketing Service, neither one want to pay for you to get a tractor. I don't have a good solution for how you get a tractor. I still don't. But they would pay for you to get an ice machine. They would pay for you to get a mixer. Like, hey, we want to, we're developing a food business, not just a farm here. We're making jam, we're making jelly, we're delivering organic produce, we're, making goat jerky. I don't know what you're doing, but it's a food business now, not just a farm business. And you're strengthening the regional food economy. So our hopeful proposal, don't, this is all tentative at this point, is that we're going to give out $1.5 million a quarter. 500,000 or so of that will be in $30,000 and less non-competitive grants, which are people who are working with a technical assistance provider doing something, and we know that they don't have to have a business plan. So yeah, so that's the little ones, Letitia. So the big ones are $100,000 or less. You do have to have a business plan for those. Right now no match still. So yeah, so that is my current solution to how we get equipment. The challenge will be how individual farmers compete with and work together to be able to get these grants so that it's a food business and it's not just serving their farm. Because you could be competing with a food distributor, because they would be strengthening the regional food business system, right? That's why we have the $30,000 non-competitive grant.
So the goal is still to be equitable, because we know that the food distributor they can hands down, and probably will most of the time, get the access to the funds.
Yeah, and we've really, those of us who have a lot of experience, like the Value to Producer grant has some scoring criteria, some priority points. So if you're a small family farm, if you're socially disadvantaged, if you're all these ways to get extra points to deal with the fact that so-and-so can affect, in theory, 300 farmers, right? So we're trying to help level that so it's not skewed. We're getting to set this grant program up. Of all the decisions that I've made in my life, getting to do this is probably giving, I still don't know what AMS is going to say to it, but getting to be part of the person who figures out how we distribute $16 million.
So would that go back to the point that Joanna was making earlier? If she wanted to partner with someone in order to...
I think that if you wanted to partner together to get equipment that was shared use between the two of you, I think that that's a perfect place for that.
And also, would that put them that partnership in a higher bracket? So let's say
it would put them at an advantage.
Advantage, yes.
Yeah. So that's one that's coming, and that's going to be, we're trying to set that up so that we can do it on a quarterly basis. We're setting some safeguards in place, every quarter when we go through how we get the people to score. I'm not going to get to score them. I don't care. I want to set up the program so that it's equitable and small business owners across the region get it, who can really make a difference and make a difference for them. And then every quarter we're going to run on using some mapping software and some demographic software to make sure that we've geographically represented it well, and then like look at who's getting the grants and see if there's something we're missing. So by doing it quarterly, it allows us to adjust as we go and tweak outreach and efforts. And there's nothing saying that the criteria that we come up with for the first round, like after 2 or 3 rounds, we're like, wow, we're really missing the boat on hitting this population that we hoped we could use the grant. Our hope is that AMS will let us edit as we go to make things as fair as possible. So that's one. The second one, and we haven't heard as much about that one in Kentucky. Kind of joke that, was just going to go through KCARD's client list and start calling you all to put together applications once they said that it was open. It wasn't a joke. It's fully my intention. That's just because that's the list I have, right? Or had. Will have until December 31st. And I know that the folks at KCARD, they will work very hard for this. Britt and I have had long discussions about it. The other one that is going to be very much, get ready, here it comes. The Kentucky Department of every Department of Agriculture in the nation was awarded I think everyone was awarded a cooperative agreement with also the Agricultural Marketing Service for resilient food system infrastructure. And so they actually worked with KCARD, CFA, and Local Food Connection, and then have brought in a broader thing of partners. And they are in the process of getting their plan approved by the Ag Marketing Service. They will have, I think, around $6 million for the state of Kentucky. And much like the other one's the regional food, it's called the Appalachian, but the whole state of Kentucky is eligible. I wrote it in when we put the application together, and the whole state of Tennessee. But I can't bring them I can't go without them. Literally, AMS wouldn't let me. So this one, they have a no match equipment only grant that goes up to between $10,000 and $100,000. No infrastructure, equipment only. You can probably do some infrastructure with the business builder one. So if you're thinking strategically, think about that. Yeah, I know, but no infrastructure for the under 100,000. It's match. Kentucky, from my understanding, has been urged by AMS that they are going to push all $6 million out in one funding session. One. So everybody, when you get off here today, I need you to go get your UEI. We don't know what the application looks like yet, but I will bet dollars to donuts that you're going to have that, okay? So my mission for the next 3 months is everyone gets a UEI. I have advised that as soon as we know for sure that we have one, if where's our conference, we find a local library or something, or a community college that has computers, and we set up sessions where people can sit down and get their UEIs and be led by someone, because I want Kentucky's small producers to be eligible between $10,000 and $100,000 in equipment. Now, it won't.
Is there a way for you to check to see if someone's already applied? Can you confirm that
for the UEI?
Mm-hmm.
No.
If they're like, I think I did. I don't know.
So log into SAM.gov and keep pushing buttons. Mm-hmm. Just make sure you go to SAM.gov, SAM.gov, and you can try to verify. The UEI probably gives more people. Kara Stewart in our office is actually really good at that annoying system, because that was the first thing of doing grants that I got tired of doing after 7 years of fighting with SAM.gov. So Kara got real good at it, and she can help you with it. And she'll log in. She can do it in person, or if you can't make it to each other, she's done it over Zoom. She's really, really good at helping. And she won't log into SAM.gov for you, but she'll screen share and get you back and forth and figure it out. So it is really, so the resilient food system infrastructure is really geared towards supply chain development. That's what you got. It's called the resilient food system infrastructure, not food business, not regional. They're wanting a resilient supply chain. So if you did have, I think the more often that you have producers, farmers, and food businesses who are working together, the more likely you are to get funded. Even if you had two independent applications, if it stayed in there working together and here's what we're doing, I think it's going to help everybody. The applications for both of these programs, I've seen trial versions from AMS. Of course, they're PDFs, and we told them that in Kentucky or Appalachia, whichever one we're talking about, we do not intend to give you a PDF application. No. So, because it's a pain. So we'll see what format we come up with. Like, Google Forms not savable. There's all kinds of reasons. Like, so we'll see. Like, I actually think a Word application is easier to deal with than a PDF. A Google, because you at least one that's Google Doc friendly. You can have a free piece of software. So think resilience and supply chain when you're thinking about the other one, the Kentucky one, when you're thinking about the Appalachian one, that we've got like 5 years to give away this money. The words you want to think about there are food business.
So could you break it, because I'm not into food, so, but could you break it down for them for an example of what would be a good track to get them started to think about?
So what I would be thinking about with any of these is that you're able to serve and reach more markets and more customers, that you're not just farming.
So would you say not so much as a CSA program? No.
No, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think a CSA would be a harder sell.
So
But if you had a CSA that had multiple farms going together, sorry.
CSA cooperative?
Yeah, I've heard that word like so many times in the last 2 weeks. I don't know where it's coming from, but yes, if you had like,
I've thrown it out there to people because I'm not into food, but I'm throwing it out there because I hear people always thinking of ways to combat some of these issues.
well, if you had you could have like in theory, you could have a co-op that worked together to produce a CSA, and that wouldn't have to be its only product. Like it could also market food into other avenues, right?
Right. So, all right.
I mean, you could potentially buy a truck with one of these.
Buy a truck. Okay. Distribution.
Potentially.
I need a
Distribution.
truck.
You need a truck. We all need a truck. I need a truck.
Somebody haul a truck. So, okay. So so in the line,
I can't guarantee they're going to let us do that, but right now,
I know you can't give us all the answers because you're working on it, but if
I mean, it's going back and forth with AMS and what they're going to let us do.
just distribution.
I mean, looking at like, I could even see a world where somebody needs like a hut, like just an aggregate sub-aggregation spot. Like if somebody wanted to start like an aggregation and distribution thing, they might be supportive of that, right? Either one of those programs.
Yeah.
Now, okay, now I talked about the up to $100,000 equipment only, no match. So the resilient food system infrastructure thing, the thing that's going to come out through KDA, and that their buddies KCARD, CFA, and UK's Local Food Connection are going to help them administer. None of us are going to get to be on the grant review committees, but we get to help set it up.
Before I forget, Letitia has a question. So it's about cooperation and increasing distribution, correct?
Yeah, it's really about just making sure that food can get from farm to consumer. That's the resilient one. The regional food business is about building food businesses, which farms are food businesses, as long as you talk about them right. Real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
The resilient food one, you could actually submit an infrastructure project that's up to $3 million big, but you need a dollar for dollar match. So I don't think that that's for, I mean, let's think about it. If you could technically buy all the pieces that make a walk-in cooler, but you wouldn't be able to pay for the wiring with it, right? Because you can take like the panels of depending on the walk-in, you can take the panels apart, their equipment, cool, but you couldn't get the wiring. And that might actually, if you haven't maxed out your KSU grant, they would probably pay for that. So, but if you think about like, oh, I can get $100,000 of equipment for free, but I'm going to have to pay for the electrician and the wiring. Yeah, it'll be okay. That's the best deal I can work for you.
Can a farmer, let's say they applied for the regional and they could do the KDA, correct? They can
Mhm.
do both. All right.
They
So
can't
let's
match each other.
can't match each other.
They're both
No, but
federal.
what if, let's say Juana opened up a community market, Letitia was the distributor on, I'm saying like if there was some type of partnership that everybody could do to
Yeah.
maximize distribution. So
Yeah.
one of it could be like somebody could have a community market store in the area, and the other grant could be for distribution like trucks and that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if they actually let us buy trucks. It wasn't expressly prohibited. but but I have a feeling once they realize that that's left out, they're going to fix it. So, and but like all
Probably.
the other programs we talked about, they won't pay for production costs. So still no tractors, still no farm labor, still no, you know, greenhouses. Oh, important point on the RFS on the Kentucky Department of Agriculture one. It doesn't include meat and poultry because they've already done so much meat processing infrastructure money that they're not including it on this one. That's their justification.
Could you say that one more time?
So on the KDA one, AMS disallowed having meat and poultry involved in that. Yeah. Well, Letitia, they say they're considering doing the local MCAP. What is it? Local meat. I can't remember. Local meat capacity. I can't remember what local MCAP stands for now. But there's rumors that that could happen again next year. Yeah, it's a lot. I think farmers who are working together, and I've said this often, those of you who've been around me a long time for grants, if I ever knew that a partner was going for the same grant KCARD was going for, I was always like, hey, let's mention each other in the applications. Because then if the same reviewer gets us, at least we know we're working together. And honestly, that's almost always worked. Because you're doing different things, you acknowledge each other, it's independent projects, but they're going to complement each other. So then at least if the same reviewer gets it, they're not like, well, these yahoos in Kentucky don't know what they're doing. They're all going after. So it has worked, at least in my opinion. I can be pretty transparent with my funding though. Real quick, and I do want to go over two others that I have seen farmers get, but it's much harder for farmers. But this really is about cooperation and multiple things. One of them is the USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program. That is really good for if Kentucky had a group to support farmers markets, like it could give money for market managers for farmers markets or for technical assistance for farmers markets. It's actually for anything but it's not just for farmers markets. It's any time that they've expanded that to be like they've included local grocery stores and restaurants and institutions. Well, grocery stores, no, restaurants and institutions. So I said grocery stores, but restaurants and institutions in the definition of the farmers market program, because that is the end of the line for before that food is eaten. Like if it's at a restaurant, like that's the end consumer who buys the raw carrot is the restaurant. So, that's really for helping farmers sell their own products to the person who eats or prepares it. They do require 25% of the total project as match. It's really hard to get in kind on those. Usually it's cash. It's mostly for markets or marketing support. CSAs are eligible, farmers markets. It's anything increasing direct to consumer sales. The reason we don't see as many independent producers get those is because usually, Letitia and Joanna, we do not have producers who are actually working together. I have seen independent producers get its sister program, the local food promotion program, because for example, I had a lamb producer that got into a market And what he needed was for other people to produce lambs in this certain way and of this certain quality so he could supply more to the market. So he got one of the first LFPPs I ever saw in Kentucky go to an independent farmer, actually one of the last. And he got money to go like train. He hired somebody to like recruit and train other farmers to grow lambs at a premium price for him, and then hired someone to help market the lambs to additional markets. It was helping his farm too, but a lot of the money actually went into helping other farms.
So did he use that as an education?
Oh yeah, it was educational. I mean, the farmers market promotion program, it can be really, I mean, KCARD's got one. We got one. We'll be implementing it soon. Got one last year for the first time. KCARD usually won't apply for one of those unless we know no one else is going. No one went for an FMPP in the state last year, so I wrote one that I knew of. And then, we've seen that's what supports the Community Farm Alliance, the CFA's Farmers Market Resilience Program is an FMPP, a Farmers Market Promotion Program. Hort Council's gotten them. Please help me write one.
So if a farmer partnered with an organization and they could have them to list them as education, right? And therefore the farmer's involved with the grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Part of ours is actually one of our partners in Ohio, Rural Action. They employ farmer mentors to help other farmers. So part of the grant is going to pay other farmers to help farmers develop their business. And even part of it's going to be to pay farmers to talk to a group of technical service providers about what farmers need.
And for anyone who's joining late, I am recording this, so I'll be sending out a recording, and it'll also be on YouTube, so everyone can watch it later.
Yeah. So the local food promotion program, actually, I've had more success. The farmers market promotion program, I think early on, actually, Community Farmers Market down there in Bowling Green got a farmers market promotion program grant to do like a mobile farmers market, to like pay for someone to do it, like all the promotional materials. And these used to be easier for smaller markets to get. Then they increased the amount of money you could ask for without increasing the amount of money that was available. And then suddenly, like, the land grant institutions of the world got interested in getting them. If you have 15 million divided up between $200,000 grants, that's a lot more grantees than you have 15 million divided up between $750,000 grants. So it became more competitive because universities can show all this impact to farmers. They now do have the turnkey program for both of these that are less competitive and limited to $100,000, and they're easier to write. The local food promotion program, I have an easier time of predicting what they're going to fund on this, which is why it's the first one that KCARD went after. And we waited for a year that we didn't know anyone else was going in the state. I mean, we know other people outside of the state are going, but that one is if you were looking at developing some regional distribution. So like value-added producer grant, locals within 400 miles as the crow flies. So it's beyond selling to person. It can be wholesale distribution. You can be like, for example, Marksberry, the meat processor here in Kentucky, rather large, got a local food promotion program grant to help expand the marketing of their meat. And I think they're on farm store. If I remember correctly, it's been a few years. But it allowed, like the farm impact there is they need to buy more animals because more people are eating meat. And so this is where if you're a food processor or a food aggregator that you're eligible for this. But in the lamb example, it was a lamb farmer who developed his own label and he couldn't grow enough lambs to meet supply. So he used the grant to get more lambs, get other people to get lambs and get more money. It can pay for equipment, but they don't like it. They won't pay for any infrastructure. It can pay for equipment. Now, both both of those programs have a planning grant component, and I've actually seen those components used more successfully than I have planning grants for value to producer. The reason that I don't use the planning grants for value, Kentucky got a planning grant for a value to producer grant this year, and I worked with them on it. It was the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. They're like, I just forgot. It's under their beef solutions. What's the brand for the Kentucky beef that's in Kroger? Kentucky Cattlemen's Beef. That's what it is. So anyway, they're looking at how to expand that beyond Kentucky so they can impact more Kentucky cattle farmers, right? That's a planning grant. Well, they're not an independent producer, so they couldn't do the we've been selling beef for at least 2 years loophole. That's only a loophole available to independent producers. So they are actually in the middle of a planning grant right now to get a feasibility study. I don't know if that makes sense. Being a farmer can get you through. Look, there's very few programs that being a farmer get you a loophole, but the value to producer grant is one of them. So, you know, if you want to talk about people who've got that grant a lot, Ocean Spray Cranberry, you should look up how many different subsidiaries of Ocean Spray's gotten that grant because they're a cooperative, so it's producer owned.
I'm always amazed by that. And also, was it Organic Farm or
Organic Valley?
They have no farm operation. They use a cooperative with different farmers.
Yep. I mean, they're using real farmers. I think Cabot's maybe. But and I'm not. Hey, honestly, well, we're being recorded. I'll stop now. I will say that there are companies who make sure that this program stays in the Farm Bill because they benefit from it. But it benefits small farmers more than it does them, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I've never had a program where I could get so much to it. My theory with this, we've had a couple of people do it 2 or 3 times. I always think of it though, I've only had 2 farmers successfully use it twice. Infrastructure, hold on. So is there a grant to help with the infrastructure to set up and raise an egg-laying hen? I don't know what size of operation you're talking about, but my initial answer is no. Off the top of my head, federal grant. And Tanya may think of something, but 50 to 100. If you were selling into a food insecure area and you had some previous farm sales, you might be able to convince KSU to give you money for that. I don't know how much money you need, but that's up to you can get $5,000 twice.
Will they supply though are you talking about the 5,000? Will they supply for laying eggs, hens? Because I know that let's say if you wanted to build a hen house, they'll give you the number for that. But as far as the hen itself, sometimes they won't cover it.
My memory on CAPE or the County Ag Investment Improvement Program or County Ag CAPE, the county money that all of our counties except for 2, and Shamika is probably not. You might be coming to us from Knott or Pike County, but it's unlikely because there's so many counties. But I've seen people do a little bit. I can't remember if they will still pay for acquisition of livestock through CAPE. That would be where I would get the hens if I could. That's my best advice because I don't think KSU will pay for the hens either. You're right, Tanya. They would pay for the materials to build the house, the hen house.
The only thing I've seen CAPE truly not pay for is anything with a motor.
Yep, that's true. And a lot of the CAPE, if you're looking at CAPE in your county, you can go and if you dig, it would take me several minutes to find the link. But now that's all under the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, but they still have their county plans and who's on your county council and who administers those funds. And I highly recommend talking to those people as nicely as humanly possible to find out what they want to fund and be nice to them because it's going to be a room full of your peers from the county that scored that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. My phone was acting weird, but I'm actually in Madison County.
Yeah, so Madison County has a lot of CAPE funds. I would recommend talking to Brandon Sears, your extension agent.
Okay.
I don't know when the deadline for it is. So here's the irony, and it's gotten better over the years. Initially, Cape funds went almost, and I understand it was set up for tobacco farmers, right? For them to diversify. So initially, if you didn't have a history in farming tobacco, you weren't getting Cape funds. And oddly, the more tobacco a county farmed, the harder it was to get Cape funds if you weren't a tobacco farmer. Tanya's sitting there in Barron County. It was awful forever. Yeah, beating your head against a wall. That's right. I heard they gave somebody money for goats last year. I was amazed. So it's gotten better, but I highly recommend having a relationship, getting to know, and I don't say having a relationship, but getting to know them and them know you, because so much of that helps.
It does. It truly does. And like due to my family, that's the reason it's easier for me to go in there because they've established that would you call it a relationship, or that they know who you are basically. And you go in there and you establish that network building, I guess that's what you would call it.
They want to know that you're really going to farm. And I say that as someone who held a phone number for 5 years that was like, if someone had, and I have been this person. It's like, I want to start my own organic farm because I read this really cool article. That happens. Someone laugh. That happens. That happens when you are a state administrator of anything. You get those calls at least once a week. It's like, I want to start an organic farm so that I can teach other farmers how to be organic. And I'm like, oh, I don't think that's why they're not organic. So I think that they want to know that you're devoted and committed, and they see you as a human and you're more than just a score on the paper.
Yeah.
So, but Shamika, if you're in Madison County, talk to Brandon Sears. And you'll be able to find my phone number somewhere if you're in Madison County.
Okay, good deal. Brandon Sears. Thank you so much.
Brandon Sears. Yeah, SEARS.
But I do think that, that's one thing that maybe I could work with Taryn with later on, is to get people connected to the right people in these offices so they could help them establish, what they need.
I think it would be really neat to eventually have a session that's like, here's how to look at, because all the counties that have tobacco money have a county ag improvement plan or diversification plan that they've come up with, and you can see if you fit into like what they want to fund. So it's real fun. I think it's fun anyway to look this things up.
And we make sure our microphones are muted. Hey, Rita. Rita? I'll send her a text. I know who she is.
You're fine. I'm not too worried about it. I'm sure I've done it before. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the overview of most rural development and AMS programs. So I think all of this, all of when all these programs rolls out is affected by farm bills, things like putting things under continuing resolutions. Interestingly, like the value added grant, the local food promotion program grant, and the farmers market promotion program grant, those are all under what's called the LAMP program, local ag marketing programs. So they have a mandatory funding level in the last farm bill. They put them all together so they could have enough money to have mandatory funding. Now, the federal government can do lots of things to mess up the fact that these are funded to a certain level. Like if you won't give them funding for salaries to implement these programs, then they can't put the funding out. So if the federal government delays its funding, then these programs won't get implemented, and the new farm bill could go back and say like they don't have the same funding level. But right now, those programs have a mandatory funding level. And as long as nobody messes with it in the farm bill, and they worked like NSAC, National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, they worked really, really hard to get these programs put together as one, and others too, worked really, really hard to get these to a mandatory funding, so it's not dependent. So this is independent of a Senate appropriations bill. If the Farm Bill goes through the same way, then it's going to have this funding again. If it doesn't, it won't. I can't predict what they're going to do up there. I can just bug them. So that said, if everything goes smoothly, I would anticipate seeing I would anticipate the local food promotion program and the farmers market promotion program rolling out around March, and the value to producer grant program coming out as early as February, probably not till March. And then they're all going to the second quarter of 2024. So just get your UEI now. If you think you want to value to producer grant, go ahead and contact KCARD. We literally already have a prospect list. So we make a prospect list every year of like farmers that we know of that might be good, and to start, working with them on a business plan, for example, Letitia. So that's where it is. That's it.
Do you have any brief advice for anyone interested in applying for a specialty crop block grant?
That's right. Make sure it benefits multiple farmers. Right now, they don't want to give you more than 50,000.
Yep.
That's it. We have had I've had a few times independent farmers get funded, but it's been really hard. You've got to have a program that's going to put multiple farmers together. And that one, I don't know if they're requiring people to have a UEI with that yet.
They didn't this past
yeah, not this last
application,
year.
no. They were just looking for things that were different and unique. So if you had
yeah. I've had a hard time getting groups of farmers together to go for that. So I think it would be, and really, like, if you're thinking about farmer education and marketing, especially a crop block grant can do that to get them better markets for specialty crops. And specialty crops don't include corn or wheat. It's most things that would be considered horticulture. So, and cut flowers are included, which is nice.
Cut flowers, okay.
Yeah.
I went out there to try to give me the UEI number. It's not really allowing me to, and I got our sign in. So who's the name of the person that could help me tomorrow at KCAR that you mentioned?
Her name is Kara Stewart.
Paris?
I don't know that yeah, so all of our emails at KCARD, except for mine because I'm the black sheep of KCARD, have been for 10 years, but it's C Stewart, STEWART at KCARD.info. I don't know that she'll be in the office for sure tomorrow. I feel like she's on the road. The other thing that you can do, what I'm hoping they get done right after the first of the year is do a couple of video walkthroughs.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing about the SAM.gov and the UEI is, right, so Kara's email address is cstewart@kcard.info. And you can find it on our website too at kcard.info. The other resource that I'm going to stick in there, make sure anytime you go to sam.gov that you're actually at sam.gov, because they will try, there's all kinds, it's free. There's all kinds of websites that will try to tell you it's not free. And I had a real pain, I had to help a nonprofit reclaim their sam.gov login last year. It is a very savvy person who just clicked on the wrong website.
It's free, and I'm out there. I logged in. I've now signed in. It just asking to request a role before they will give you that UEI number. So I don't really understand.
So you may have signed in before. If you go ahead and request role and then check every email address you've ever had.
I put my business name in there, and it said I had never ever signed up, so I went ahead and signed up.
Okay.
But I'll just reach out to her and she can help. I don't want to go out here because they say you can skip, request a role, and come back to it later. So I'll just get with her now that I have a login number and a second backup login. I'll just don't want to go any further if I don't really need it right now.
I'm gonna drop 2 links in the chat real quick. And we usually go through, there's one on just like looking at available grants, and then you don't necessarily have to, the other one is the registration for federal grants link that we have on our website. You do not necessarily have to legally organize your business to be eligible for any of these grants. Actually, you may have to for LFPP, the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program, now that I said that. But most of the grants that you all would, the grants that I consider you all to have the greatest ability to successfully get, you do not have to legally incorporate a business. And at the Getting Registered for Federal Grants website, that is, it has, you can click as Kara's email and her phone number in that second link. And just full warning, I am leaving KCARD on December 31st, and we've been splitting these duties, so she may be a little bit overwhelmed for a tiny bit. But I would start with step 2, getting registered with sam.gov. And I'm trying to remember if you still have to file the notarized letter. That may have changed. But definitely the sam.gov and the grants.gov register. You don't necessarily have to do the grants.gov, but the sam.gov. So that's it.
All right. I'll probably do another Zoom in January, since Michael was unable to attend tonight, to get everybody up to speed as far as conservation practices that you'll be eligible to apply for in 2024. And also, I would like for him to go over in depth of, or anyone in NRCS, I can give you a brief summary of the easement program, but how farmers with small acres can merge and also be eligible to enter into the easement. And all the requirements that have to be initiated in order to do so. That's it for tonight. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Myrisa, once again for hosting this grant topic.
It's always my pleasure. I think this is my last one.